Well, good to see you all. Hey, we've got a couple of new people for Bible class today. Yeah, LaDon, it's nice to meet you. We've heard a lot about you. We're very thankful for your parents being a part of our church family. They're really a blessing. So, yeah. And we've got Ron back there. He and I were talking. We met up at Ridley's, and he was asking me a question or two about Hebrews. I'm like, dude, we're having class Sunday morning on Hebrews. And here he is. Very good. Good to have you.
Yeah, he told me at the bar last night he'd be here.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's a true story.
I know. I think he just confessed something for you, Ron. Oh, man. Okay, so just a bit of a recap here about where we are so far in Hebrews. We're going to be starting in chapter 3 today. So go ahead and turn it to Hebrews 3. If things go according to plan, we're only going to cover 6 verses today. So I keep it down in first or second gear here right now. But for Hebrews, we've been thinking about a couple of things. One is that the writer of Hebrews, which we don't know who that is, traditionally it was identified with Paul, but the writing style is very different than the way he does things. We don't really know. But the writer of Hebrews, we just call him the preacher because we don't really know. So the preacher does a couple of things. One is to elevate Jesus above everything else. And he's looking at the various things that, especially it seems like this is written to a Jewish Christian audience. That's why it gets the name of Hebrews. So he's telling them these other things that you're elevating or going back to, Jesus is greater than them. You need to cut ties with this and with that and look back to Jesus again. So we're looking to elevate Jesus above everything else. And then challenging the reader to be faithful to Jesus. Endure. Don't be attracted to these other things, but endure and stay faithful. And in every section of the book, the preacher will tell the listeners that Jesus is greater than whatever this thing is. And then he gives them a warning. So chapters 1 and 2, which we looked at already, basically he's talking about angels, messengers that God sends. And he says Jesus is greater than them. And chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Therefore we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it." So there's the warning, right? Don't drift away from the gospel message. Don't drift away from Jesus that you've given your life and your loyalty to. And then in verse 3 it says something about how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? What does the author mean by neglect? Bless you. Does neglect get used in our culture today? And if so, what does that usually have to do with?
Kind of means ignore.
Kind of means to ignore, okay, yeah.
Like I neglected to clean my rooms.
Ah, yes, okay.
It's like a lack of maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay, lack of maintenance, good, yeah.
Not
Okay.
tending to a need. Ignoring it.
Yeah, okay. Seems like I hear it connected with children being neglected or animals being neglected, like in our culture today. Or a lawn being neglected, yeah, right. Oh, sorry.
Looking at other people's lives.
Oh, yeah, looking at, I know. I do kind of go pharisaical when I look at lawns sometimes. Lord, I'm glad that you made me, not like this guy. Okay, so yeah, neglect means to ignore or not maintain something. So how would we neglect such a great salvation then? What would that look like? Because he warns us not to neglect it.
The word tells us to work out our salvation daily.
Okay.
So if you just go, I would think if you go periods of time, not even pray, not even think about God, not even
Okay.
ask Him to give you direction, guidance, forgiveness, or anything.
Yeah.
You're just neglecting
Okay. Yeah, good.
what
Okay.
He has for you.
Yeah. Not praying, not reading the word. Okay. Neglecting it. which would kind of be like neglecting your relationship with God too, right? I mean, we think about prayer and His Word as kind of our primary means of communication between us. So we wouldn't be communicating with Him at all. How else? How could we neglect such a great salvation?
Like Bo used the word ignore, so ignoring what the evident truth of life, what we need to be doing, what God did for us.
Okay.
Ignoring it.
Ignoring the evident truth of life. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Adam?
The Bible says to pick up your cross daily.
Yep. Yeah, Luke had to sneak in that word daily. You know, Mark doesn't have it, but Luke does. And it's very true. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't make a decision to follow Jesus just once and then we're good. You know, it's every day, one more time, get up. Help me, Lord, today to do this and this. Help me to follow you. Help me in this. So it's a daily thing. That's good. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I had to think of, it says that, we look into the Word, like in the mirror, we see dirt on our face, we
Yeah.
just don't turn around and walk off.
Yeah.
We read the Word and we, if we're convicted or, we see we need change, that we
Yeah.
remember that and do it.
Okay, good. Yep. Yep, looking at the word like a mirror for us and then acting on it. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Something else that, is that it says forsake not the assembling together.
Uh-huh.
And encompassed in that statement then is the fact that we need to listen to what our brothers and sisters are telling us.
Okay.
What God is doing in their life or how they interpret something. I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's right out of Hebrews. We'll get there at chapter 10. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting thing because I think that's one thing that is sort of lost on quite a lot of people. They say they're believers, but they're not part of a church family or anything like that. Just yesterday I was at the pool. You know, going to the pool can be quite an evangelistic, effort. Anyway, we're watching kids and I'm talking with parents. I started talking to them about Vacation Bible School in July. And there was one young lady and she said, my son's been asking questions about, why don't we go to church? And she's like, well, yeah, we could do that if you want to, buddy. And that kind of thing, letting children run the stuff really makes a lot of sense to me. But she's like, but we can do that at home too. And I'm like, can you really? I mean, yeah, you can pull on a video and you can watch somebody, some talking head, that doesn't know you or whatever. But there's a lot missed when we don't have fellowship with each other. That's how Gideon and I were talking last night in Galatians 6:2 about the importance of bearing one another's burdens, and also sharing with one another our joys. And so that's something we have to really work at. And just seeing each other once a month or once a week helps, but that's still not even probably as good as we should be doing. So, your presence here, Eric, always encourages me, and Eliana's presence here encourages you.
Yeah.
Not me here. Yeah.
I like to think of the verse in Psalms. David says, "Oh, magnify the Lord with me." And we can't do that if we're not together.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's the context of almost every book and letter of the Bible is to a community of people. There's a few to one or two guys, but most of them is set in that. And even when Paul's writing to Timothy or Titus, he's encouraging them to be faithful in their work with the church, so it's still about the church. Okay, very good. So the preacher here will say something, Jesus is greater than this thing that you're giving your attention to, and then he'll give a warning. And so that was some of the warning there in chapter 2. Moving to chapter 3 now, let's think about this just for a moment. Every nation has their own heroes, so to speak. who are some heroes of our nation, United States of America?
George Washington.
Okay, thank you. I thought this would be easier than that. Yeah, GW. Others?
Abraham.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln, man.
Ben Franklin.
Okay, yeah, Ben Franklin, right? You should have worn your shirt today. She's got like a, huh? Yeah, I know, it is. Yeah. Who do you have on that? There's 6 people, right?
George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and
Abigail
Abigail Adams.
Adams, yep, okay. Yeah, okay. Very good. Well, what we're going to read about now, moving into this section, is the Jewish nation's probably greatest hero. That's Moses, okay? Abraham was important, but I think Moses probably took a place of prominence there. So let's just read the first 6 verses. And you know, we kind of wear this front row out. I'm gonna start over here. So let's just read one verse apiece. Yeah, see now Eric has to turn there now because I'm calling him on it. Yeah. Verse 1, don't listen to him.
Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession. He was faithful to him who appointed him, as Moses was also all his house.
Verse 3. You can just do one. That's okay.
Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as a builder of a house was greater honor than the house itself.
Hmm.
No more.
Verse 4, Ron?
For Eric,
Oh,
Me? Okay. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God.
Now Moses was faithful in all God's house as a servant to testify to the things that were to be spoken later.
But Christ is faithful over God's house as his son, and we are his house, if indeed we hold fast our confidence and our boasting in our hope.
okay. Very good. So the Jews had heroes they looked back to, and none was greater than Moses, the deliverer, the lawgiver, prophet, the one that spoke with God on Mount Sinai, right? And that's one of the things, I can't remember which study it was. Was it Numbers? Might have been Numbers. I feel like I've been wandering in the wilderness a long time. You guys with me? Where it talks about how Moses, you know, God speaks with him differently than other prophets, right? With other ones, he speaks to prophets through dreams and visions and various things, but with Moses, he speaks like face to face, which isn't really face to face, because if he did see God face to face, got to get another deliverer. But it's more of an intimacy. God speaks directly to Moses, right? So Moses, incredible hero of the faith for Israel. How does the preacher here describe Moses in these verses, 1 through 6?
Servant.
A servant, okay? Yeah.
faithful,
Faithful.
Well, in Deuteronomy 34:10, it's the end of Deuteronomy. So since then no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face.
Yep.
For all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and all his land, for all the mighty power, for all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel.
Okay. Yeah, the greatest prophet, right? Now you went outside of Hebrews, but I'll count it because God's the author of the whole book, so. Good, good.
He also, I mean, it's important, I think, to notice that he's faithful in all God's house. Even though we know Moses wasn't perfect and he didn't
Okay.
get the promised land, he obviously had the heart, but he messed up, but God still saw him in a good light.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And he says it twice, right? Verse 2, verse 5, faithful in all God's house. And that was perfect segue, Trent, because I'm like, what is meant by that phrase, you know? Because Moses wasn't perfectly faithful. You know, that's why he didn't get to enter into the promised land. So, what does it mean that he's faithful in all God's house? And it talks about him also testifying. What's he testifying about? These are real stumpers, huh?
Like an example of what Jesus was going to be or do, so the things that were to be spoken later.
Okay. So that's the beginning of Hebrews, right? Long ago, and many times in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, Moses, others. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, right? So Jesus is greater than that. So Moses speaks and Jesus will. Okay, good. I've always sort of been troubled by that phrase that David was a man after God's own heart, but yet we know what went on in his life too. So maybe when it says here that he's faithful in all God's house, we're not looking for perfect obedience. What would God be after then? I mean, he wants that, obviously.
I think the key part of that, man after God's own heart, is that he's a man.
Okay, okay.
But so when I see this, obviously Moses, he's typological of
Okay.
Christ.
Like you were saying. Mhm.
So it's his life itself, in many ways, is a testament towards what Christ would do.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
So as either as we look to Christ, he is Moses was a Christ-like figure.
Yeah.
A shadow of what was to come. So.
Okay, okay, I like that. Okay. Yeah.
Seems like circular reasoning, but somebody can't be after God's own heart without God. God makes that possible, right?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we've got servant. He's faithful in all God's house. Who's a prophet. And then the preacher goes on to use some construction language here. Moses is faithful in all God's house. Verse 3, the builder of a house has more honor than the house itself. Verse 4, for every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. So, kind of a little quirk about me, I like Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. Not a great dude in his personal life. It's kind of interesting. I think he was married a few times. Like I said, a personal life and morally not always great. But there were 2 times that a house he designed burned down. And one of them, the only thing that survived was his drawing room where he designed stuff. Everything else burned down. And he acknowledged, he said, this is the only part of my life God knows I have right. So anyway, I've always liked his architecture and the way he thinks about things. What was kind of the philosophy behind his designing of homes is small bedrooms, because you just sleep there. But the family and everybody, that's where they spend time together. So big open areas, big eating areas, the kitchen, all of that. And then the bedrooms were small, So it's kind of a little bit opposite of our culture today. Seems like we give these grand bedrooms, and, we'll throw a living room in there. You can watch the TV in, So anyway, but I found out, I've always wanted to go see in person one of his homes. And I've always thought I had to go to Chicago or Arizona or something like that. But I found out that there's one in Idaho. And so it came up on my feed, and I thought, oh, awesome, I want to figure this out. And it's this coming Saturday. I'm like, whoa, cool. And so I looked at it deeper, and you can get a ticket for it, and it's like $85 for like 1 hour, you know. I thought, and it's down by Burley. I thought, oh, no, I'll just look at pictures. Okay, but this is an example of what I'm talking about here is Frank Lloyd Wright's houses are amazing, but it's like about him and his philosophy and what drove how he designed and stuff that people are interested in. So the architect, gets more glory than the homes do themselves. And that's what he says here about Moses and about Jesus here. Brian, could you go ahead and click to the next slide there, please? So here is a life-size model of the tabernacle. You've got kind of the fencing around it. You can see the altar where the priest would offer sacrifices. Some just instructed by God, as we looked at in Numbers last week, and then some where Israel would also bring animals to sacrifice. And then you've got the wash basin there where the priests would emphasize their ritual cleanliness before they could enter into the tabernacle. Go ahead and go to the next slide now, Brian, please. Oh, yes, sir.
You want to go back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go back. LaDonna was there.
That's awesome. Did you get to go in there?
Yeah, he toured us and went into the tent.
Are you the tribe of Levi as well? Okay, that's fine. You got to go in. That's really cool. So I'm sure you had a tour guide that explained a lot of stuff, or did you just kind of go in on?
No, we had to go in with someone.
Yeah.
That's the only way we could get in. So yeah, he explained what everything was used for.
That's great. And so where is this located from where you were?
So that's at the very end of Israel. That's Timnah Park, close to Elat, which is like down by Egypt.
Oh, okay. Wow, all right. Right on. Well, I'm glad I have you here today. And you can set me straight if I mess this stuff up, okay? Good. That's fantastic. Okay. Go ahead and go to the next one then, Brian. Thank you. So this is out of the ESV Study Bible, a little artist's rendition of what it looks like inside the tabernacle here. So you can see a couple of barriers. You know, you've got that outer curtain and then the inner curtain. And then you see these different pieces of furniture here. And you may remember back at the beginning of Numbers that the different tribes of Levi had specific tasks. There were some that would, some of the priestly ones would cover them themselves with beautiful blue cloths and so forth. And then it was the Kohathites that would come and carry it, but they didn't actually touch. Right? They'd have these long bars in there so they weren't touching the holy things. So the priests would be preparing them to travel. But you see there the table of showbread and the candles, the menorah there, the altar of incense, and then you step into, well, I say you, but only the high priest on the Day of Atonement steps into the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place where the Ark of Covenant is there. And remember we read that in Numbers that it was Aaron's staff that budded that was put inside of that as a symbol of his priesthood. Okay. Go ahead and go to the next one then, Brian, please. Thank you. Okay, and then here's kind of a close-up of these various pieces. Now, all of this, Moses didn't do this work here. God gave his spirit and an incredible gift for making these things, for fashioning things, to Bezalel and Oholiab. I don't know if I said that right. They're the ones that constructed the tabernacle and the furniture inside, overlaying it with gold. I mean, they were incredibly skilled people. Especially when you're out in the wilderness, right? And he's like, man, I don't have my forge on me. I guess I have to build one. You know, and they did all of that out there. So you can read all about the tabernacle that Moses oversaw being built, Exodus 25 through 31, and then 35 through 40. So there's a lot of the book of Exodus that talks about the way the tabernacle was made. An incredibly detailed plan, and everything in it had meaning, representing various qualities about who God is. And this showed Israel that even while they're wandering in the wilderness, God is in their midst, right? We've looked at that in the book of Numbers, where when they encamped, each tribe had the places there to be. The Levites had their place in between God and the tribes, and then the tabernacle in the middle to symbolize that God is in their midst. And then when they would be on the move, right, there's tribes in the front, there's tribes in the back, and then the pieces of the tabernacle, God is in the middle again, traveling. Now his spirit already took off and guiding them, the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, showing them where to go. But all of this is to show that God in his holy presence is in their midst, and what it requires of sinful people to have him in their midst. It required an incredible amount of sacrifice and attention to his law, and still they broke it numerous times. So Moses was a faithful builder of the tabernacle, and more importantly, a faithful builder of the nation of Israel, God's people. So is it any wonder then that if the preacher is saying that Jesus is greater than Moses, is it any wonder that Jesus is born into a family where Joseph, the father, is what profession? We know him as a carpenter, okay? That's pretty cool. I know a pretty good carpenter here too that helped me with my furniture. Okay, it's interesting actually. So in the New Testament, the word that we translate as carpenter, tekton, actually has a broader meaning than that. It can also be translated as, a woodworker like we know, but also like a mason or a builder or an engineer. So Ray Vander Laan, somebody that knows a lot about archaeology and these sorts of things, he takes groups of people into the Holy Land. And one video session we watched with him long ago talked about how it could be that as King Herod was getting the masons and the various builders in the land to come and build things like the temple and so forth, it could have been that Joseph, Jesus' father, was involved in that as well. Was Jesus there at the tabernacle as a child, apprenticing from his father, And then later when the disciples are like, look at this is so beautiful. He's like, yeah, all this is coming down. I mean, I was part of this, my dad. I don't know. But it's interesting to think about. So Jesus, born to Joseph, Jesus would have learned his father's earthly trade. So he was a builder too, like Moses. So Jesus is greater than Moses. He has this same thing about him as a builder. And if Moses was a builder of God's house, the nation of Israel, how about Jesus? Was he also a builder of God's people?
It says we are his house.
Yes, we are his house. Okay. Jesus, verse 3, has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses. Verse 6, Christ is faithful over God's house as a son, and we are his house. If you're a part of the house, what part of the house are you? Interesting to think about. And here's where we insert funny, self-demeaning comments. Through Christ, the world was built. Okay, we know that. Genesis 1:26, John 1:3, Colossians 1:16 all talk about, and Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. Jesus was there with God the Father. He was known as, John tells us later, that he was the Logos. He was the Word. The Word was with God. And everything was created through him. Colossians 1:16 says. In fact, it says, there isn't anything made that wasn't made through him. Okay, so Jesus, even before he was the man Jesus that we know, he was a builder as well. And then Christ's church is being built, not just Jews like in the Old Testament, but people of all nations and languages. And it's not about your nationality, but it's about the condition of your heart, wanting Jesus to be Lord of your life. So I wonder if I could, now I'm going to come over to here because you guys did some reading already. I want a few readers, so I'm just going to hand some out. How about you three here on the front? Could you look to 1 Corinthians 3? 1 Corinthians 3, and we'll read 9 through 17. Eliana? Psalm 118, verse 22, please. And then 3 more. Matthew 21:42. Mark 12:10. Luke 20, verse 17. And you're not off the hook. Acts chapter 4, verse 11. Okay. And then LaDonna and Faye, Ephesians 2, 19 through 22. Maybe you guys can share that. 19 through 22. And then somebody there in the back, one of the Barton folks. Okay. 1 Peter 2, verses 6 and 7. Everybody know their assignments? Usually there's one that's like, what was that again? Good job. Faithful in all this house. Okay, so all of these pick up that kind of construction image or building language that is used here, the preacher uses about Moses, but this is about Jesus as part of this building language, okay? Okay, you guys ready? Yep, 1 Corinthians 3, 9 through 17.
For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ.
Now, if anyone builds on a foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are.
Whew, okay, so here is Paul writing to the Corinthian church, and he's using this building metaphor, right? So, and you said at first, Elise, that we are God's house, right? Okay. Also God's field, God's house, but he uses several different images, but then he picks up that God's house image and continues on with it, right? And then he talks about what's the foundation of that house. Paul talks about the gospel and the teaching, but Jesus is the foundation of the house, okay? And then Evangeline, you went on to read about, hey, builders can build with all these different stuff and gold and precious jewels and hay and straw, whatever, but they'll all be tested by fire. In other words, fire destroys all of those things. They're not eternal, right? And so I'm sure those early, those Jews that are followers of Jesus, they're thinking about stuff that we saw up here, right? The tabernacle, the temple, and all of that, the beautiful furniture that was given so much attention to. Those things all pass away. I mean, where did the ark end up? We don't really know. And it's not in some warehouse like in Indiana Jones, I don't think it says, but I don't know. Anyway, okay. That stuff it's not eternal. It's not lasting. And so then it goes on to say, but this is a type of what was going to happen, and that's that you now are the temple. You are the tabernacle of God, that Jesus first came and tabernacled amongst us. He took on flesh, lived amongst us, and now the Spirit of God lives in each one of us that are in Christ. That's pretty cool. So the building metaphor kind of carries through and talks about how Jesus should be the foundation of our life and that the Spirit takes up residence within us. And that's God's building, okay? Now there's going to be more about Jesus here. Go ahead and start yours, Eliana. This is Psalm 118, verse 22.
The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
Okay. And then Bo, go ahead.
Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes."
Okay, so Jesus is quoting Psalm 118, right? Okay, go ahead, Jones.
Have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
I think we have, and we just did. Okay. Luke 20, verse 17.
But he looked directly at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone."
Okay, so Jesus, in all three synoptic gospels, quotes Psalm 118, verse 22. What's the cornerstone that the builders rejected? What does he mean by that? This stone that they rejected, and then it's become the cornerstone or the chief stone.
They rejected Christ.
What's that?
They rejected Christ.
Yes, they rejected Christ. So he says, I'm that stone that was rejected, and now it's all being built off me. Okay? Anybody want to give us insight on what a cornerstone or a chief stone is?
Isn't it like chosen because, I mean, based on its angles and everything else would be lined up perfectly? I don't know. You have to choose the right
Yeah.
square.
The entire house was based off of that one stone.
Yeah. So scholars have a couple of different ways they think about it. The primary one is that, but they've also talked about how sometimes when like they're built, someone you would be building like an aqueduct or something, you have these stones that go up, and then this last stone here locks it all into place and holds it all there, right? So this is the most important piece, right, that makes it all hold together. But most of them go along that idea here that the foundation for whatever building, you take this one stone that seems to be just right, the right angles, the right, everything about it, and then everything is built off of that, right? And so you get the idea, like the Jewish leaders were like, hey, we're building God's house here, and so here we go. Oh, that one does not fit our idea about how this should look, right? So throw that stone out. That was Jesus, and we build it on how we think things should be done. And then Jesus says the stone that was rejected is the chief cornerstone. So actually, he's brought back, and he's the one that everything in God's house is built off of now. Okay, and so he recounts that in each of the synoptic gospels too. Paul?
That's interesting because that goes along with what I read a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And this writer was that cornerstone was a pyramid.
Okay.
And, the stone was laid aside, they brought all these stones in as they're building the pyramid. A pyramid has three, or is it four? Four.
Mm-hmm.
But, and so the very top cornerstone was pushed off to the side until that was the last one to be put on.
Okay,
And
interesting.
so in the building of the building, it was rejected, in other words. until-
Yeah. Yeah, so that metaphor works in several different ways, right? Okay, good. Somebody else? Anybody else?
Also on the cornerstone is usually an inscription
Okay.
of what it was for.
Yes. Okay. That's interesting. I think it's in Revelation, there's something about to him who endures will receive a new stone with his name on it. I don't know if that's connected to this. I shouldn't go off on this, just like some little thought right now, but anyway. I'll look at it this week, and if it makes sense, I'll talk to you about it. Okay. What's Acts 4:11 say? Okay, so Peter makes it plain to us here, in case you guys didn't get what Jesus was talking about when he was quoting Psalm 118, he's the one. He's that chief stone that God's house is built upon, okay? And then what does Paul say in Ephesians 2, 19 through 22?
And what is the immeasurable greatness of his power toward us who believe, according to the working of his great might, that he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places.
In whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are built together for an habitation of God through the Spirit.
Okay, Paul picks up that image again and says, Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection and ascension back to God makes him that chief stone, and all of us are being built up into God's house, right? I'm a brick, I'm somewhere in here pretty dull, but I'm stuck in there and I'm helping hold it up, but we're all together building that house, okay? And finally, Mr. Blake, 1 Peter 2, 6 and 7, please.
For it stands in the scripture, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame.
Okay.
So the honor is for you who believe, but for those who do not believe.
Okay, very good. So God says here, I laid in Zion, and Zion, that's the hill that Jerusalem was built upon, but it's also kind of like, it's also stands in for heaven, kind of, Mount Zion is God's city, right? And so he says, I'm building that, and that cornerstone is Jesus, and it's to our honor to believe in him. Those that don't believe in that cornerstone aren't a part of this building project. You want to be a part of the project. Okay, and it's interesting when you get into Revelation, you see about at the end of time that God's dwelling place is with man, that we see coming out of heavens, the city of God coming down, and a new heavens and a new earth where we're together. That's more today for our sermon, so I shouldn't go too far there. Okay, so from what we just said today, name some ways that Jesus is greater than Moses. This will be how we finish. He's the son, not the servant. Okay, good. Seamless. Oh, sinless. Seamless is kind of cool too. But yeah, sinless. Okay, yeah. Moses he was a good builder, but yeah, he blew it. Okay, Jesus was sinless. Okay, that's enough right there to be greater. Any other thoughts? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your attention and participation today. We'll pick up with probably chapter 3, verse 7. We may back up a little bit, whoever the next teacher is. I think it's Larry's turn. Or it's you? Okay. So yeah, we'll take off from here. Thank you very much.